In this video, we'll look at configuration file for your process scheduler. To identify the location of process scheduler, you would want to go to PS admin and look at the configuration homes. So right now configuration home is ptconfig. You can also select option number 2, which is to administer your domain for your process scheduler. Whatever changes you make to a domain for a process scheduler, all the changes will be implemented in the configuration file as well. So let's go to this configuration home, which is dptconfig. So right now we are in dptconfig and the directories for app server, data, temp and web server. Process scheduler by default will reside in app server directory. So you'll go to app server directory and then you will find a folder called PRCS, which refers process scheduler. Go inside this and this is your process scheduler domain name. So if you go to this, so you will find your domain name as pshrDMO. Right now we are looking at process scheduler admin. So this is our domain name. Let's go inside it. And when you go inside it, the directory structure is quite similar to what we saw for application server. You have different directories, then these are the configuration file used by process scheduler, and this is the log directory. So let's look at configuration file for process scheduler, psprcs.cfg. So it's a configuration file. And configuration file for process scheduler is very much similar to application server. You will find most of the values and most of the parameters same as application server. First section is for database information. It is exactly what we saw in app server configuration file. Then you will have tracing capabilities. You can again trace SQL. Then you have trace people code. You can use combination of any of these to trace people code. You can trace application engine again. This is the location pointing to your database directory where you have your database software installed. In this case it's Oracle, so it's pointing to that location. And then again it's log fence. If you want to enable the logging, increase the logging, you can use 3, 4, 5. Default is 3. So this information is about crystals. If you are planning to use crystals, this is the crystal path. If you're planning to use cobols, this is going to be your cobol directory. With tools 855, crystal has been deprecated. And these are other directories, your tools bin directory, temp directory. So as you can see, these are using your environment variables. So you need to make sure that these environment variables exist. Then only you will be able to go to these directories. Another alternative option is if you do not want to use environment variables, you can provide the absolute path. For example, C, CRW, or wherever your crystal resides or wherever your cobol reside. Then you have few more parameters for PS tools, DB flags, PS AESRV. When we're looking at application server, we found the settings for different application server processes such as PS AP, PSRV, PS Watcher. And similarly in process scheduler, we will find those values for our process scheduler services, which is PS AESRV. In this case, you will find maximum instances. You can increase this value if you want to start more. And recycle count, whenever you want to recycle that particular process after these many transactions. PS DSTSRV is your distribution agent, which is responsible for sending your report files to your web server. Like you can change min max for this, you can change the recycle count. This section is for SQR. When you plan to run SQR on your process scheduler, these are the values that are picked. SQR bin refers to your SQR binary directory, which is where your SQRW is located. Then you will have your SQR flags, which are used when SQR is run. This is your SQR directory where you have stored your SQRs. You can include the path for your delivered SQRs as well as any application specific SQRs, or if you have any custom SQRs. You can see this is pointing to PS app home SQR, and then the next is your PS home SQR. You can add more path by adding a colon sign and then enter that location. Next is for data mover. By default, these are the values which are picked up by data mover. This will be the input directory, this will be the output directory. You can make changes to this. And then there are some values for COBOLs. If you're trying to use Envision, you may want to make changes to this location. For Crystal, this SMTP we already discussed in case of app server, and these are settings for cache. There's some settings for integration broker as well. Search indexes, PS monitor SRV, again a process which runs on process scheduler. Then you will have some settings for LDAP authentication. As you can see, not all of these values you will be changing. You will be changing only few of these values often, and most of these will be like one-time effort. So this is end of process scheduler configuration file. And likewise, we have other configuration file which are used by process scheduler. You do not need to edit any of these files unless there is some critical issue going on. Then you may have to make changes to, let's say you might have to look at the environment file. And now let's go to logs directory. So these are the logs for your process scheduler. As you can see, there have been so many logs generated. Let's open one of the log, and in the logs you will find information about how the processes are doing. If there is some error, you will find that here. Other files that you may want to look at is like distribution agent. If you see that some files are not getting posted on your web server, then you may want to look at what's going on with distribution agent. Monitor server will make sure that everything is working fine, so you may want to look at this as well. If you get a warning, that is fine in most of the cases. If there is an error, you may want to fix it because error can cause issues. This is for your master scheduler, which actually takes control of a process. If you look at this, the last line, it's pointing out that it's now creating a new log file and all the entries will go into this log file. So you may want to archive the old log files, and you have stder. This is another log file you may want to look at if you have some issues. As you can see, it says the process cannot access the file because it's being used by another process. So it was trying to access this file. So you got the error and it is recorded here. So when you're running a process online, and if you see something like this, you may want to come and look at this log file. Then similarly, you can look at std out. And then you can look at the tux log again. Tux log will give you more information. So what is logged in these files can be controlled by your configuration file. As you know, there were parameters for trace SQL and tracing other values. You can use those parameters to make sure what's being recorded in these, and you can delete all log files. Let's try to delete this. If a log file is being used by an active process scheduler server, then you won't be able to delete it. And this is the cache directory where the cache will be stored. If you want, you can clean this. Whenever you do this, make sure your process scheduler is shut down. Log output is another directory where you will find log information. This video was about configuration and log files for your process scheduler.